The Galactic Council convened once again in the heart of the Milky Way, a sprawling meeting of minds from across the cosmos. It was an ancient gathering, with representatives of species far older and far more advanced than humanity, whose presence at the table was still a topic of quiet speculation. Humans, who had only begun to explore their solar system a few centuries ago, were still seen as newcomers, ambitious but young. Some viewed them with a mixture of curiosity, admiration, and, at times, condescension. The Council itself, a coalition of the most powerful and influential species in the galaxy, had always tolerated humanity's presence at the table, as if indulging a child at the grown-ups' discussion. Yet, the humans had proven themselves in unexpected ways, slowly earning respect as their technology advanced and their power grew. Ambassador Rebecca Voss, who represented Earth, sat confidently among the alien leaders. Her mission was clear, secure. Trade agreements, gain access to alien technology, and, most importantly, solidify Earth's place as a recognized power in the galaxy. With Earth's rapid technological advancement and the United Earth Federation's growing influence, the time had come for humanity to claim its rightful seat at the galactic table. The humans had come with open minds, eager to collaborate and negotiate. Yet what they faced was nothing less than a cold dismissal. As the meeting progressed, it became painfully clear that the older civilizations had no intention of taking humanity seriously. The head of the Zorath Dominion, a towering insectoid species, waved off the human proposals with a dismissive gesture, muttering something about primitive technology. The delegation from the Eldarim, an ancient and enigmatic race with a long history of galactic dominance, merely laughed at the humans' suggestions, calling them insignificant and too inexperienced to influence the course of galactic politics. The tension in the room grew thick as the conversation turned to the future of interspecies governance. The more established races, some of whom had ruled entire sectors of the galaxy for millennia, began to suggest that humanity should focus on keeping to their corner of the universe, offering little more than token roles in the Council's grand schemes. Ambassador Voss felt a sharp sting as she listened to the words meant to belittle her people. The insults weren't direct, but their meaning was unmistakable. Her delegation, once full of hope and enthusiasm, began to fall silent. Voss could feel the weight of the eyes upon her. The once hopeful energy in the room turned into something cold, something suffocating. The other delegates were speaking as though humanity's rise was nothing more than a fluke, a passing moment in the grand history of the galaxy. For a moment, the ambassador said nothing. She looked at her team and then at the faces of the alien representatives. There, sitting in their seats of power, they spoke as though they controlled the fate of the galaxy. The words, cold and dismissive, hung in the air. They spoke of what humanity should do, how they should behave, how they should know their place. The message was clear. Humans were still children in the eyes of the galaxy's elders, and their future was only as valuable as the Council allowed it to be. Voss's pulse quickened, her breath steady. Slowly, she stood up from her chair. Her voice, calm and deliberate, sliced through the murmurs. "We've come far enough." She let the silence hang before continuing, her words weighing heavy with resolve. "If this is the respect we can expect from you, then we have no place." At this table, the room froze. For the first time, the ancient representatives, who had grown so comfortable with their power, found themselves stunned into silence. The galaxy's most powerful species watched in disbelief as the human ambassador made her declaration. There was no immediate response. No one dared speak, as though waiting for the inevitable to unfold. Then, without another word, Voss turned, signaling her delegation to follow her as they left the grand hall. Outside, in the corridors of the Council's massive structure, Voss's team exchanged looks of disbelief. No one had expected this, certainly not so soon. Humanity had just taken its first bold step in an entirely new direction, and for the first time, the galaxy saw humanity as something other than an upstart species. For the rest of the galaxy, the question lingered: what would humanity do next? The weight of their decision was already being felt, but the full consequences were yet to unfold. As Voss walked away from the table, her mind raced. This wasn't just a political move, it was a statement. Humanity was done waiting for permission. The moment Ambassador Voss turned away from the table, a strange silence swept over the Galactic Council. At first, the alien representatives were unsure whether what they were witnessing was real. Their expressions ranged from shock to confusion, with some barely able to suppress a look of amusement. It felt like a game, a dramatic gesture, surely nothing more than a moment of temporary frustration. But as Voss, with a composed and deliberate stride, walked away from the vast table, followed by her delegation, the mood in the room shifted, from confusion to something far deeper: unease. The heavy doors of the council hall closed behind them, leaving the alien leaders staring at empty seats where humans had once sat. For a brief moment, no one moved, as if the galaxy itself had paused. Then slowly, the whispers began, first faint, then growing louder. The realization dawned: the humans weren't joking. They had made a decision, a choice that would echo throughout the galaxy. They had walked away. Across the galaxy, the news was transmitted instantaneously. For the first time in centuries, all eyes were turned toward Earth. The very same species that had once been viewed as insignificant, unpredictable, and even laughable, was now at the center of galactic attention. The broadcast, shown on every screen, captured the defiant departure of humanity from the summit, a silent protest that spoke louder than words ever could. The older species, who had once brushed aside the humans with such ease, now watched with a growing sense of dread. They had underestimated the resolve of this young species, who had just made a statement so profound it reverberated across the stars. The humans weren't begging for recognition anymore. They weren't asking for permission. They weren't looking for approval. They had shown the galaxy one simple thing: we do not need you. In the council hall, the reaction was immediate, though the damage had already been done. The Zorath Dominion, one of the oldest and most powerful races, immediately called for an emergency session to discuss the implications of humanity's walkout. But it was too late. The humans were gone, and with them, the facade of their dependence on the council had crumbled. The galaxy was watching, and now, nothing would ever be the same. The older species, long accustomed to holding all the cards, found themselves on the defensive. They had ridiculed humanity, dismissed their proposals, and questioned their place in the galaxy. Now, they realized the gravity of their mistake. The humans had just given them a taste of something they had never anticipated: power. Real, undeniable power. Not through weapons, not through political leverage, but through the strength of a people who refused to be treated as lesser. The council scrambled, trying to adjust to the sudden shift in dynamics, but their efforts felt hollow, futile. The council, full of ancient beings who had manipulated the galaxy for millennia, now found themselves with a problem they could not solve. They didn't understand humanity's strength, nor did they know how to respond. How could they? The humans had done something that defied every rule of galactic politics. Instead of using diplomacy, power, or negotiation, they had used a quiet, deliberate act of defiance. And in doing so, they had gained something far more valuable: the full attention of the galaxy. It was a gamble, but as the silence stretched on and the weight of the moment sunk in, the alien leaders began to question whether they had truly misjudged the humans. The sense of superiority that had once defined the council began to erode, replaced with uncertainty. What if humanity didn't need them? What if they were stronger than anyone had ever thought? The old races had seen this before. A species, rising quickly, shaking the foundations of galactic power, but none had ever walked away from the table before. None had ever chosen to remove themselves from the system entirely, as if to say, "We will build our own future." Back on Earth, Ambassador Voss didn't look back. The decision had been made, and it was clear. Humanity was no longer just a participant in galactic politics. They were players in their own right, standing apart from the chaos of the Council, their own destiny in their hands. No one knew what would happen next, but the message was loud and clear. The galaxy would never view humanity the same way again. The question now was whether the rest of the universe was ready for what was to come. As the leaders of the galaxy scrambled to respond to the shockwave caused by humanity's dramatic exit from the Galactic Council, new and unsettling reports began to surface from all corners of the universe. The situation was worse than they had imagined. Humanity, it turned out, had not simply been playing along in the game of galactic politics. It had been playing a completely different game all along. The true depth of humanity's capabilities had been hidden for years, and the Council, in its arrogance, had failed to notice. Unknown to most of the galaxy, Earth scientists had been working on projects in secret, developing technology far beyond anything the other species had realized. Over the years, human scientists had gradually acquired knowledge of alien technology, and with it, they had made astounding breakthroughs. The humans had learned to adapt and improve upon the inventions they had studied, creating systems that were not only self-sustaining, but capable of reshaping the balance of power in ways that no one, especially the galaxy's oldest and most powerful races, could have anticipated. Humanity's military, which had once been considered little more than a clumsy collection of ships and outdated technology in comparison to the mighty fleets of the galactic superpowers, was suddenly revealed to be far more advanced. The United Earth Federation had quietly developed new energy sources that surpassed anything the galaxy had seen before. They had created warp drives that could bend space itself, traveling across the stars with unimaginable speed. But most shocking of all were the new weapons humanity had crafted, devices that manipulated the very fabric of reality, turning the laws of physics into something that could be controlled. This gave humanity an advantage unlike any other species had ever possessed, and the other races, now fully aware of what had been hidden, were left reeling. But it wasn't just the technology that stunned the galaxy. It was humanity's unity. For centuries, humans had been fractured, divided by borders, ideologies, and conflicts. Yet, in the face of the Council's insults and dismissals, they had come together in a way that no one could have predicted. The disarray that had once marked human society had given way to something new, a collective will to stand up for their place in the galaxy, united by ideals of freedom, self-determination, and independence. There was no longer any question of whether humanity was ready to step into its own. They were not the fractured, distracted species that had been so easily dismissed before. They had found strength in their unity, and that strength now radiated outward in ways that no one could have prepared for. As the leaders of the galactic powers scrambled to grasp the full scope of humanity's hidden capabilities, the realization began to settle in. This young species, who had been so easily underestimated, was not something they could easily control or manipulate. The galaxy's most ancient civilizations, who had spent millennia shaping the universe to their will, now found themselves confronted with a species that was not bound by the old rules of power. Humanity, for all its apparent immaturity, had done something the galaxy had never seen before. It had risen, not just through technology, but through an unshakable will to create its own path. This revelation sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Those who had once ridiculed humanity as weak and insignificant now faced a harsh truth. The humans had been playing the long game, biding their time, building strength in secret. The powerful fleets that had once ruled the stars were now forced to reconsider their place in the grand scheme of things. No longer could they assume the humans would be content with scraps. No longer could they ignore the fact that this fledgling species had built something far more potent than anyone had ever expected. In the councils of the ancient species, frantic debates broke out. Leaders argued, some in fear, others in rage, as they realized that humanity had become a force to be reckoned with. It wasn't just about technology or military might anymore. It was about a species that had defied all expectations, one that had the power to reshape the very fabric of galactic politics. And for the first time, the galaxy was left wondering, what would humanity do next? The balance had shifted, and now the galaxy had to face the fact that humanity was no longer a mere participant in the great game. It was a new player, one whose move could change everything. As the galaxy's leaders scrambled to understand the consequences of humanity's bold exit from the Galactic Council, reports flooded in from every corner of the universe. It became painfully clear that the humans had been playing a different game altogether, one that no one had seen coming. Earth scientists, working in the shadows for years, had developed technologies that were far beyond what any of the galaxy's older civilizations had imagined. Their innovations were not just impressive, they were revolutionary. Humanity had learned to harness alien technology, adapting it with their own creativity to build systems that made them not only self-sufficient but incredibly powerful. The United Earth Federation, once seen as a young, inexperienced player in the galactic arena, had secretly been developing breakthroughs in energy, propulsion, and weaponry. Their military fleet, which had always been considered outdated compared to the grand forces of the galaxy, was revealed to be far more advanced than anyone had anticipated. Humans had invented energy sources that seemed to defy the laws of physics, creating warp drives capable of shifting space-time itself. Weapons, once thought to be mere speculation, now existed that could bend reality and manipulate energy in ways that left even the most seasoned species in shock. In the blink of an eye, the balance of power had shifted, and humanity now stood at the center of it all. But what truly stunned the galaxy wasn't just the humans' technological prowess. It was their unity. The very species that had once been divided by borders, politics, and social strife now stood together as one, unified by a singular purpose. In the face of the galaxy's disdain, humans had done what no one thought possible. They had found strength in their shared ideals of freedom, self-determination, and unity. The divisions that had plagued them for centuries seemed to vanish as the humans stood tall, not in conflict with one another, but in solidarity. They had forged an unbreakable resolve, a determination to carve their own path in a galaxy that had once dismissed them. To the older civilizations, this was a terrifying realization. The humans were not the helpless children they had once appeared to be. The galaxy's great powers, who had spent eons shaping the universe according to their will, now found themselves facing a new, unpredictable force that could not be controlled. For the first time, they were forced to confront a species that would not bow to their ancient hierarchies, a species that had not only caught up to them in terms of technology, but surpassed them in terms of willpower and resolve. Even as the reports continued to flood in, revealing more and more of humanity's hidden strengths, the galaxy's leaders were left reeling. There was a growing sense of dread among the Council's members. They had underestimated humanity in every way, from their potential to their unity. No longer could they assume the humans were content to play by the old rules, to stay in their place. Humanity had shown the galaxy that it was ready to rewrite the rulebook. The realization was starting to settle in among the galactic powers. This young species, with its flawed and often turbulent history, was not only capable of changing the future, it had already started doing so. The ancient races who had lived for millennia had always assumed they held the reins of the galaxy. But now it was clear that the humans had stepped into the game, not just as participants, but as powerful contenders. And with their technological edge and newfound social cohesion, they were no longer the underdog. They were a force to be reckoned with. For the first time, the leaders of the galaxy were faced with the terrifying possibility that humanity's rise might not just be a phase. The shift was permanent. The balance of power had irrevocably changed, and now the question was not if humanity would take its place among the stars, but how the galaxy would respond. Would the ancient civilizations continue to resist the inevitable, or would they recognize the new reality that humanity had introduced? One thing was certain: the galaxy would never be the same again. Humanity had not just played the game, it had changed the rules. The moment humanity walked away from the summit, the galaxy's delicate balance was shattered. The alien races, humiliated and enraged by the audacity of the humans, could not allow such a bold act to go unanswered. A sense of collective pride was at stake. The ancient species, used to commanding the galaxy with near absolute power, couldn't accept being shown up by a young, seemingly naive species. Within days, the Council began to mobilize its fleets. They were determined to remind humanity of its place in the cosmic order and show that no one could walk away from the table without consequences. But what the alien factions didn't realize was that humanity had already changed the game entirely. In a series of swift, calculated moves, human ships, using tactics that no one had seen before, began striking first. The attacks were precise, surgical, and utterly unexpected. Humanity's military might, once thought weak and disorganized, was now revealed to be a force of unparalleled innovation. The alien fleets, despite their superior numbers and technology, were taken off guard. Human ships, equipped with newly developed weapons and energy systems, tore through their defenses with frightening efficiency. The battles weren't just fights. They were strategic masterstrokes that crippled the alien forces, one after another. The humans had learned from every encounter, adapting quickly, evolving faster than anyone had thought possible. Their technological advancements gave them the upper hand, but it was their unshakable determination that allowed them to push forward and fight with the desperation of a species that had nothing left to lose. The first clash between the human fleet and the galactic powers took place in the shadows of an ancient star system, where the Zorath Dominion's fleet had positioned itself in a show of strength. The humans struck quickly, appearing from behind, asteroids and dark space pockets, catching the Zorath forces off guard. For the first few moments, the Zorath ships, with their massive, imposing forms, seemed invulnerable. But the humans had anticipated this. With lightning speed, they unleashed a barrage of energy weapons that bent space itself, punching through the hulls of the massive alien ships. Zorath shields, once considered impenetrable, flared and flickered as the humans' attacks destabilized them. The first ship fell, then another, and another, until the once proud Zorath fleet was in disarray. Panic spread as the survivors scrambled to regroup, but the humans were relentless. They knew the stakes, and they fought like they had nothing to lose, because they didn't. The news of this victory spread like wildfire across the galaxy. The Zorath Dominion, the great superpower of the galaxy, had been defeated by the humans. It was a blow to their pride, and to the pride of every other galactic power that had ever looked down on humanity. The victory was not just a military one, it was a message. The humans were no longer the weak, naive species that could be bullied into submission. They had emerged as a formidable force, capable of fighting on equal terms with the oldest civilizations in the galaxy. And the aliens were beginning to realize just how much they had underestimated them. The galactic powers, once confident in their dominance, found themselves caught off guard as human fleets continued to appear across star systems, dismantling enemy forces with ruthless precision. The humans were not only matching their technology, they were outthinking and outmaneuvering them. The ancient species, accustomed to war strategies passed down over millennia, were now scrambling to keep up with the unpredictable and highly adaptable humans. As the battles raged on, humanity's reputation grew. Word spread across the galaxy about the humans' unyielding spirit, their capacity to turn the tides of battle with sheer willpower. What had started as a single, unexpected victory soon turned into a series of devastating defeats for the alien factions. Each battle reinforced the idea that humanity was not to be underestimated, that their strength was not just in their technology, but in their innovation, their tenacity, and their refusal to back down. The galaxy was in turmoil. The alien races, that had once seen humanity as a minor player in their grand game, were now faced with a stark new reality. The humans were no longer content with being pawns in someone else's game. They were players in their own right, and they would no longer tolerate being dismissed or controlled. The first clash had ignited something unstoppable. A new power had risen, and its name was humanity. With each resounding victory, humanity's position in the galaxy became more secure, but not in the way the Council had hoped. The ancient species had expected the humans to crumble, to retreat into their primitive past and return, begging for a seat at the table. Instead, humanity had done the unthinkable. They had walked away, and in doing so, they had proven that they didn't need the approval or permission of the galaxy's older civilizations to chart their own path. Humanity had shown that their destiny was theirs to shape, and they would do so without asking anyone's permission. The galaxy, once so confident in its established hierarchies, now watched with a mixture of awe and fear as humans began to forge their own way. Rather than turning inward in anger or fear, humanity reached out, creating something entirely new, an intergalactic alliance built not on dominance or control, but on values that the galaxy's ancient civilizations had long forgotten. The foundation of this new order was freedom, cooperation, and self-determination. A radical departure from the old ways, where power and influence were the currency of the galaxy's political games. Humanity had built a system based on mutual respect and shared goals. At first, the older species of the galaxy resisted. The idea of sharing power with a young species that had just begun to establish its place in the universe was too much for many to accept. However, with the growing might of humanity's fleets and their undeniable influence, more and more species found themselves reluctantly joining this new alliance. They did so not out of respect or admiration, but out of necessity. The alternative was to be left behind, powerless in a galaxy that was now being reshaped by humanity's bold new approach. Still, despite the grudging cooperation, there was an underlying current of fear. The galaxy's leaders, though outwardly respectful, could not shake the worry that humanity was not only unpredictable, but also uncontrollable. Ambassador Rebecca Voss, the woman who had stood up and walked away from the table, had become a symbol of humanity's newfound power. She stood at the forefront of the new intergalactic order, watching as more species aligned with Earth's vision. But it wasn't just diplomacy or politics that had shifted. It was the entire approach to galactic governance. Humans didn't seek to dominate. They didn't crave control. What they wanted was collaboration and independence, both for themselves and for others. Their message was clear. The galaxy no longer had to be ruled by a few ancient races. It could thrive through cooperation, where every species had the right to self-determination. For the first time in galactic history, the balance of power was shifting in favor of those who believed in freedom rather than control. Humanity's rise wasn't just about military might or technological advancement. It was about a radical idea of what a galaxy could look like when it wasn't divided into rigid, unchangeable hierarchies. As Earth's influence spread across star systems, a new chapter was beginning, one where the future was open to all and governed by the ideals humanity had fought for from the very beginning, the right to determine one's own path. As Ambassador Voss gazed out over the horizon, she couldn't help but smile. Humanity had done more than just prove their strength. They had opened a door to a new era, one where their voice would no longer be ignored, where they could lead by example, not by force. The galaxy had watched them rise and had been forced to reckon with their power, not just in warfare, but in the strength of their ideals. They had walked away from the table, yes, but in doing so, they had set the stage for a new kind of order, a future that had once seemed impossible. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. The old powers would always fear what the humans might do next, but they could no longer deny that they were a force to be reckoned with. The question was no longer whether humanity would rise, it was whether the rest of the galaxy could adapt to the presence of a new, unpredictable power. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Humanity had found its place among the stars, and they weren't going anywhere.